are lots of people out there that have seen the Evergrande crash, the loss in the stock market, the situation that investors in China who bought condominiums in speculating before they were actually constructed are ended up with paying mortgages on property that will never be built, they'll never own. And you look at that situation, and there are people who say, well, we're going to have an economic implosion. And I don't think that's what's going to happen. And for those who are sitting around waiting for an economic implosion, I think what we're going to see is more likely is a social implosion or a political one, and we can talk about that further.
Yeah, this is interesting because you have mentioned earlier that some people look at the made-up GDP data and think China's booming or it's going to completely collapse. And you say both of those are wrong. So you mentioned it's not going to be an economic implosion, it's going to be a social implosion. What do you think is going to be the end result of this?
Like, what does that look like, maybe, first of all?
Well, we saw last year the unemployment numbers for the younger generation shut down because they were getting ugly. I remember numbers in the low 20s, and there was speculation that, realistically they were in the 40% range. And then we have seen this flight capital movement into Singapore, which has been almost unbelievable. And then we have seen the tremendous movement of Chinese nationals across our own border, coming into our own country. And finally, then there's this development among the youth in China called lying flat. They don't do anything. They just stay at home. They're discouraged. All kinds of clinical depression cases have skyrocketed in China. And so the social implosion, if you remember, there was a number, and I believe it was something like 5%, a 5% GDP number was what China had to maintain in order to retain social stability. Okay. So ask yourself, in the last 2-3 years, have you seen any GDP numbers coming out of the party that are less than 5%?
Well, I mean, not officially.
Right. And so they're doing everything they can to maintain social stability. And my point here is that there is the potential that's very dangerous in China, that the social compact between the people and the party, the mandate of heaven, if you will, when that is finally perceived to be shattered, then the Communist Party has got a political problem on its hands. And so what is that compact? Essentially the agreement was, okay, party, you get to have authoritarian control, but in return, we get to have rising income and building of wealth. And so long as you do that for us, we'll cede control. That's basically the social compact. And so if we look from the Cultural Revolution coming all the way forward to just the pandemic, those generations of Chinese have never known any kind of setback financially. It's been increases every single year. And now it's on the ropes. And so the danger of some type of social political implosion is where I would be concerned. And as we get closer to that, Matt, I think that the economic situation in China means that there is going to be more pressure on the military, on the national defense, and in difficult economic times, there's always the possibility that Xi will bet the farm and do something irrational in terms of a military movement. And that's That's kind of the way that I see it developing.
When you talk about the social implosion, I think a lot of people may expect it to be triggered by some large, let's say, collapse in the real estate market or that kind of. I think when we think of an economic implosion, that's what people would think of, right? Like some big economic catastrophe, then that triggers some kind of social. But you're saying that there's probably not going to be the economic catastrophe part of it.
Yeah, I think that if the people are sitting around waiting for the People's Republic of China to have an economic implosion that, on a relative scale looks like Zimbabwe or Somalia, a large industrialized economy doesn't collapse like that. And what happens is that it becomes extremely stressed, and this is part of this leveling out, this Japan-like future, that the social issues start to become extremely painful. And I don't know what could trigger it, Shelley, kind of any number of things. But I think that it's important to remember that in the back of the mind of the party's leadership, what is their greatest fear? And their greatest fear is something like a Ceausescu moment occurring in China. And for your viewers who don't recall, this was in December of 1989 when Nikolai and Elena Ceausescu, the rulers of Romania, were brutally executed by a firing squad when the people finally turned on them. And this really has shaken up generations of Chinese leaders because Nikolai Ceausescu was a Mao-loving, PRC-supporting dictator of Romania. And if you look at the dates, it was just in April of that year that Tiananmen Square occurred. And a few months later, I guess it was in about November of 1989, the Berlin Wall came down, and then boom, this whole regime in Romania not only imploded, but its leadership was brutally executed by firing squads. So this is in the back of the minds of the leadership in Beijing. And so this is this potential for a social implosion that I'm talking about. At some point, we may see that, and it will be brutal and it will be very fast.